Bungie just dropped an absolutely massive Season 20 weapon tuning preview on us that will quite literally change the entirety of the game Destiny 2 as we know it. This is going to make a huge shift for a variety of different weapons. In today's video, let's go through everything. In the Season 19 mid-season balance update, we brought in several changes to address weapons in PvP. In Season 20, with a new campaign and raid incoming, we focused on a substantial pass over heavy weapons for PvE and adding subclass verbs to several exotic weapons, tying in with the new anti-champion capabilities these verbs now have. Between the new weapon changes and everything else that's new changing in Lightfall, we're looking forward to seeing what combinations players settle on for the Legendary campaign and the Day 1 raid. Weapon archetypes. When playing on console, your reticle will turn red when it's over an enemy that's inside your weapon's effective range. This is a visual aid that we've wanted to be global for a while. We've also enabled this on PC. In a future season, we'll be making this color customizable, similar to the base reticle color. Red reticle is now enabled on PC, nice little change there. Linear fusion rifles, here we go. You probably saw this coming. Linear fusion rifles outperform other heavy weapons for boss damage by a wide margin and have had plenty of time in the sun. We're bringing them down enough for other options to compete. At the time, exotic heavy linear fusion rifles don't do enough to justify using one over a legendary, so they're not affected by this nerf. We have linear fusion rifles, reduced damage versus champions, mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 15%. That is a pretty harsh nerf to linear fusion rifles. Sleeper Simulant and Queenbreaker are unaffected. Sleeper fans, this is not a drill. That makes Sleeper very good and a very viable option, especially considering the current sandbox right now. So good news for Sleeper. Machine guns now. Machine guns have been buffed a few times over the past year or so, but only in PvE. We've opted to increase their base damage a little, which makes them more forgiving to use in PvP. The buff also applies across the board in PvE. PvP damage is typically the base, and PvE has multipliers on top of that. We're also substantially increasing machine gun reserves, giving them higher uptime, particularly useful in hard content. This sounds great. Increased damage by 10% with the following effects on the time to kill against a Guardian with tier 6 resilience, high impact frame, TTK reduced from 0.6, rapid fire, TTK reduced, adaptive frame, TTK unchanged at 0.53 seconds, and increased reserve ammo by 50% at 0 inventory stat and 20% at 100 inventory stat. Note, inventory stat is a 0 to 100 value behind the scenes. This is presented as the actual number of rounds in game, but you can take this to mean that low reserve machine guns get a boost while large reserve machine guns get a smaller boost. So a nice change to machine guns in PvE, and they might be a bit of a tyrant in PvP now, we'll see. We haven't really seen them being used in a while in PvP, but we'll see what happens after these changes. Heavy grenade launchers. Heavy grenade launchers haven't been touched in a while and are substantially below some other heavy options for damage. On top of that, grenade launcher projectiles have time travel, a ballistic arc, and relatively small blast radius, so it can be hard to constantly land shots on a moving target, and they may hit fewer targets with the explosion that you would expect. With this change, heavy grenade launchers should be significantly more useful in PvE and easier to use in both PvE and PvP. Increased damage versus champions, mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 20%, miners by 40%. Grenade launchers are goated now. Grenade launchers are absolutely nasty after that. Holy crap. Improved projectile collision, making it slightly easier to land hits. Increased blast radius by 1 meter. Parasite unaffected, it does huge damage already. I'll be bringing you a video very soon talking about the best grenade launchers, the ones that you need to farm to be ready for the heavy grenade launcher buff. Holy crap, that is a crazy change. Shotguns. The new shotgun reticles show the correct spread pattern, but in its shipping form, the size of the reticle wasn't affected by the current spread angle, which will change if you jump or with magazine options like smoothbore. This change should make the reticle accurate in most ways at 80 to 5 degree field of view. A change to make this accurate for all FOV options will come in a future season. Shotgun reticles now change in size proportional to spread angle. Related note, the Legend of Accura's hipfire reticle is now a bit more representative of its very large spread angle. Very nice, we'll have to see what Accura's is like after that. Kinetic weapons. Kinetic slot weapons have always done 5% more damage versus unshielded targets in PvE. Little known fact, if you already know that, I was aware of this. This meant that kinetic slot stasis weapons were straight up better, with extra functionality and no downside. We wanted to give players more of a reason to run kinetic damage type weapons, so instead of a blanket kinetic slot damage boost, we're switching to a kinetic damage type boost based on whether your kinetic weapons use primary or special ammo and increase the bonus significantly. Kinetic primary weapon damage multiplier increased from 1.05 to 1.1. Kinetic special weapon damage multiplier increased from 1.05 to 1.15. Kinetic slot stasis weapons no longer have the 5% damage bonus versus unshielded targets in PvE. There's also a kinetic damage type perk coming in lightfall. Ooh, very nice. Exotics. Just like many players, we've wanted exotic weapons that have a strong theming around their damage type to use the real subclass 3.0 verbs, and Lightfall's longer development and playtest cycle gave us the opportunity to add subclass verbs to many of the top picks. Our goal with adding subclass 3.0 verbs is to grant these weapons additional functionality and let them tie into subclass builds in a more meaningful way. In most cases, this is also or is paired with a hefty buff. Whew. The Queenbreaker's blinding effect was underwhelming for heavy weapons, so we've changed how that's deployed. Note that Queenbreaker was also not affected by the global damage reduction to linear fusion rifles, making it substantially stronger by comparison. We'll see if the Queenbreaker is good after all of these changes. I'm skeptical. Shot now chains to nearby enemies and uses Arc 3.0 blind. Interesting. We'll see. We'll have to test this out when it goes live. Ruinous Effigy feels very voidy, and slamming the Transmutation Sphere was an obvious place to put an additional effect. Transmutation Sphere slam attack now suppresses. That's a nice change. The Leviathan's Breath buff from a few seasons back inadvertently reduced the PvP damage enough that it could no longer one-hit kill players in their supers with a headshot. We fixed that, but also added Volatile and increased the damage versus champion substantially to highlight its anti-champion role. Jeez. Now applies Volatile on perfect draw impact. Increased damage from 396 to 442. This allows it to once again one-hit kill all supers in PvP. Increased damage versus champions by 30%, a nice buff to Leviathan's Breath. We've got 1000 Voices was briefly a top pick in Season 14, but has been eclipsed by many other options since then. We wanted to lean even more into the chain of solar explosions by adding Scorch, and with the global heavy weapon changes, it's also a strong option. If you have Ember of Ashes equipped, landing a full burst on a single target will trigger an ignition immediately. Exact results may vary depending upon whether players are also scorching a target. Each explosion now applies 10 plus 5 with Ember of Ashes Scorch stacks. That's an excellent change to the 1000 Voices. Next up we have Sunshot was a top candidate for applying solar subclass verbs, and the explosions are the clear place to add that too. Explosion on kill now applies 10 plus 5 Scorch stacks. Polaris Lance always had a burn effect, so it was an obvious change to switch this to Scorch. Perk 5th shots now apply 40 plus 20 Scorch stacks instead of a custom burn. Nice change to Polaris Lance. Two-Tailed Fox had tough competition as a heavy exotic weapon, but now it's the only weapon that can apply subclass verbs from multiple damage types without extra steps. Solar Rocket now applies 60 plus 30 Scorch stacks instead of burn. The Void Rocket already applies suppress, and the Catalyst completes the trifecta. Wow, that's nice. A Two-Tailed Fox Catalyst as well. Prometheus Lens has the utility with its Solar 3.0 rework. We wanted to give it something more spectacular on kills in addition. Added the Incandescent perk to the Catalyst. Wow, that's really nice. We've got Grand Overture's latest buff, increasing the missile's damage by 50%. Brought it up plenty. It just needed its blind updated into tie to Arc 3.0. Very nice. Switch the Catalyst to use Arc Blind. Hipfire Reticles. We're starting to experiment with Hipfire weapon reticles conveying more information and use the Manticore as a test bed for this. You can expect to see more weapon type or exotic weapon functionality showing up in Hipfire Reticles in Season 21 and beyond. Add a reticle element to the Manticore showing current stacks of anti-grav repulsor perks. With Strand coming to the game along with a new weapon damage perk, we've updated a couple older perks. What is that? Along with a new Strand weapon damage perk? Interesting. Osmosis now works with Strand. Elemental Capacitor now has the following effect when using a Strand subclass: plus 20 airborne effectiveness, plus 25 for the enhanced perk. Okay. Rewind rounds will be appearing on more weapons in Lightfall, but was custom built to only work with the Vault of Glass weapon set. We've tweaked it to be more general purpose. Rebuilt to work on non-Vault of Glass weapons. Very nice, I like to see that. Eager Edge had some bugs that needed addressing in a previous release. We've now taken the time to do a more complete rework, which also let us reduce or remove most of the restrictions that were in place. An Eager Edge buff for the speedrunners? No longer deactivates when moving faster than 35 ms. Deactivates correctly after a single melee swing. Reduced the base lunge distance buff from 2 to 1.8. Reduced airborne lunge distance penalty from 25% to 20%. The enhanced perk now increases lunge distance slightly, back up to 2. Wow, that's a really nice buff right there, and the speedrunners will rejoice for that one. Blinding grenades on grenade launchers don't do arc damage, so it's not appropriate for them to trigger Arc 3.0 blind effects. We didn't feel the need to change their disorienting effect though, so we've updated the name to Overlap Less, renamed blinding grenades to disorienting grenades. Interesting. Vice Stinger is one of the most desirable origin traits in the game, particularly but not only on linear fusion rifles, to the point where it makes it hard for non-Vice weapons to compete. It needed some adjustment. With this change, it's still valuable, but more in line with the other Origin traits. This was typically a full reload when the perk activated. Now it reloads 25% of the magazine, so a fair change to Vice Stinger. The future. We're already hard at work on seasons 21 and 22, and some of the changes we're making include adding a full auto melee accessibility setting, which will apply to all forms of melee, which will probably be mostly for glaives, right? A pass over weapon type and exotic weapon hipfire reticles, including increasing how visibly they change even at high FOV, and adding features like charge meters and exotic perk counters. We've also got balance changes in the works, but it's a little too early to get into them. We'll have more information to share post lightfall. So there it is. Wow, that is a huge update. I'm very excited for this. Let me know what you are most excited for out of all of these changes down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date on all the news in Destiny 2. Smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.